This bill, Mr. Speaker, it kind of looks nice. It has a nice sound to it. It's kind of like chocolate cake with a lot of icing on it, you know. You look at the icing on a chocolate cake and you say, you know, God, that'd be pretty tasty. That really looks pretty good. But it's really not good for you, Mr. Speaker, and there's no way that you can square that piece of cake to be good for you.
Let's start at the beginning and look at the issue that my bill is seeking to address, the specific remedy that it offers, and the opportunity that it represents for the government and all members of this House. Right now, there are two major human resource challenges facing Canada's construction industry: regional labour shortages and barriers to labour mobility. The 2011 edition of the Construction Sector Council's Construction Looking Forward report suggests that to replace retiring workers and maintain productivity, construction employers collectively must hire more than 320,000 new workers between now and 2019. While training programs and recruitment from non-traditional labour sources are part of the solution, they will not be enough to ameliorate the significant labour shortages that are projected for the decade ahead. Compounding this problem is the unevenness of demand for construction workers. Some regions of the country, such as Newfoundland and Labrador, are expected to face significant worker shortages until next year. Others, such as Ontario, will offer fewer work opportunities in the short term, but many more between 2015 and 2019. And a third group, including Quebec, Nova Scotia and Alberta, will offer consistently high numbers throughout the forecast period. With the demand for labour thus high in some parts of the country and lower in others, it would be in everyone's best interest to facilitate the mobility of unemployed workers from one part of the country to job openings in another. This would be an easy problem to solve if construction jobs were permanent, but they're not. Construction is a transitory business. When a hospital, a mall, or for that matter, a Pan Am stadium is built, the job is done. Work can last for days, weeks, or months, but the bottom line is that it isn't permanent, and no worker can fairly be expected to move his or her family to a new city every time the workplace changes. And therein lies the rub. Under current rules, construction workers often incur large personal expenses to accept jobs in other parts of the province or country because neither their travel nor accommodation expenses are tax deductible under the Income Tax Act. As a result, these costs create a huge disincentive for workers to accept work in those parts of the country that are experiencing skills shortages. Figures compiled on behalf of the Building and Construction Trades Department of the AFL-CIO suggest that the average mobile worker spends approximately $3,500 of his or her own money to temporarily relocate. That's a significant barrier to the appeal of working mobile. Without wanting to be too cute, I ask my honourable colleagues to imagine what would happen in this place if we told members tomorrow that they could no longer get financial assistance for their secondary residence here in Ottawa while they're here on the job, or for their travel for that matter. And if that's not enough to spur us on to creating fairness for the building trades, let me just remind members that this House already acknowledged that transitory workers merit financial support, and Budget 2008 provided a tax break to truck drivers to assist with mobility challenges in that industry. So I'm calling on us to do the right thing here today and create a labour mobility tax credit for the building and construction industry too. Specifically, my bill allows tradespersons and indentured apprentices to deduct travel and accommodation expenses from their taxable income so they can secure and maintain employment at a construction site that is more than 80 kilometres from their home. Adopting this bill will remove one of the largest stated barriers to labour mobility in our country and will pave the road for workers to move freely between regions of the country where their skills are in demand. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, but the building trades took the minister's concern seriously and had the projections related to my bill audited by Henry Warren. The audited numbers were given to every member of this House during the building trades last lobby day, and I trust that everyone will have familiarized themselves with the costing of my proposal. But let's take a quick look at the numbers again, just to make absolutely certain that we're all on the same page. There are an estimated 1.6 construction workers in Canada, 1.6 million construction workers in Canada. An estimated 10% of them travel each year. At an average cost of $3,500 per worker per year, A 15% tax credit would cost the government $525 per mobile worker per year for a total cost of $84 million. Working with the same number of 160,000 travelling skilled trades workers whose average weekly employment insurance benefit would be $393 per week for an average period of unemployment of 4 weeks if they were not working, means that the government would pay $251 million in EI benefits per year. That means that the tax credit proposed in my bill would actually save the government $167 million per year. As I said at the outset, workers win because the travel and accommodation costs will no longer be a barrier to accepting decent jobs for decent wages in other regions of the country. Employers win because they will have access to larger pools of qualified workers without needing to resort to the costly temporary foreign workers program. And the government wins by having taken a concrete step towards addressing regional skilled labour shortages, all the while reducing dependence on costly social programs and actually boosting long-term income tax revenues. It doesn't get much better than that.
Mr. Speaker, let me now address some of the specific concerns we have with the bill before us. First, we believe that providing an income tax deduction for job-related travel and accommodation expenses, as proposed under Bill C-201, would make it difficult to ensure that tax relief is not provided for personal expenses that reflect lifestyle decisions. Under the provisions of this bill, expenses incurred by eligible individuals who choose to live more than 80 kilometres from their workplace for personal reasons would qualify for tax relief. Second, the open-ended nature of the proposed deduction would also make it vulnerable to unfair tax planning and abuse. For example, individuals could arrange their affairs to claim a recreational property, such as a cottage, more than 80 kilometres from work as their principal residence, and deduct the cost of maintaining their urban residence as an expense required to secure and maintain employment. That's a serious flaw with this piece of legislation, proposed legislation, Mr. Speaker. This is not conducive to a fair tax system, especially as we have just been debating C-4, which emphasizes our government's commitment to a fair tax system for all Canadians. Third, the bill would raise equity concerns as eligible tradespersons and indentured apprentices would be able to reduce their tax liability when they incur eligible travel and accommodation expenses, whereas other workers who must incur similar work-related travel expenses, such as nurses, would not receive tax assistance. Mr. Speaker, this would result in an individual with similar capacities to pay tax having markedly different tax liabilities due solely to occupational differences. Fourth, it is not clear that the bill would increase travel by tradespersons and indentured apprentices. In fact, for individuals who would have incurred eligible travel and accommodation expenses in any case, the deduction would represent a windfall gain. And finally, perhaps most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the cost of the proposal would be significant. Preliminary estimates suggest that providing tax assistance to tradespersons and indentured apprentices for travel and accommodation expenses would cost approximately $60 million per year at maturity during a time our government is committed to returning to balanced budgets and eliminating the deficit. This bill, which already raises some concerns, would be extremely costly to the government. In addition, Mr. Speaker, C-201 would create pressure to extend tax relief in respect of other expenses or other types of employees at a higher fiscal cost. Make no mistake, our government believes in tax relief for all Canadians. Canadians know that. When it comes to tax reductions, this government has a long-standing record of significant achievements. By keeping taxes low, our government is allowing Canadians to keep more of their hard-earned money. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, this bill is poorly targeted, would subsidize personal choices, and would open the door to unfair tax planning. It would also entail a cost of approximately $60 million per year, would create pressure to extend tax relief to other work-related expenses at a higher fiscal cost. In addition, our government already provides tax relief and program support for tradespersons and apprentices, and tax relief for employees who must incur travel-related expenses in the course of their employment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the one hand, the government representative has just made it very clear in terms of that if we take a look at a cost analysis of the implementation of this particular bill, that you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million. Then on the other hand, we had presentation made by the sponsor of the bill saying that the Minister of Finance should, in essence, be rubbing his hands, saying what good fortune we have in this particular bill because there is going to be a net benefit coming to the taxpayer because there will generate in excess of, I believe it was $80 million, in excess of $80 million. I believe it was just over $100 million. Well, Mr. Speaker, I suspect, truth be known, it would likely be somewhere in between. And I don't necessarily believe that that is and should be the only argument to be made on whether or not the legislation should be passed or ultimately fail. I think there's a number of other factors that need to be taken into consideration, Mr. Speaker. What is clear is that there is no doubt a question in regards to what would the impact of the legislation from a financial point of view for Canadians, what would it actually be? And I think that we would be in a better position to be able to get an answer to that question if, in fact, we were able to take it to committee stage where we can bring forward individuals, whether it's the research analysis people or some of the different professionals, individuals possibly from the Department of Finance, to find out what the actual answer is. All I know is I believe that both the former Speaker and the member that introduced the bill are likely, well, one of the two have to be wrong. We know that, Mr. Speaker. And there's a $200 million gap, or close to a $200 million gap between the two of them. So, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that there is some merit for us to acknowledge right up front that we really don't necessarily know the facts. Last year we were talking about the foreign workers program, and we have tens of thousands of foreign workers that come into Canada in part to meet that particular demand. Is the government doing its fair share in terms of ensuring that our jobs are in fact first and foremost being offered and made available to Canadians? And second, to what degree are we enabling individuals the opportunity to get those jobs? We need to recognize at times there is a certain percentage, I believe, in the construction industry, Mr. Speaker, and I could be corrected on this, but I believe it's just over 1.5 million people that work directly within that industry. And there is a percentage of those individual workers that do have to, not necessarily because of choice in terms of their profession. If you're a plumber, for example, and you have been offered an opportunity to, let's say you're living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and you've been offered the opportunity to work on a significant project in the province of Saskatchewan, whether it's a Regina, a Yorkton, or wherever it might be, that you're afforded the opportunity to be able to take it. And on the surface of the bill that's being proposed, there is a great deal of merit in terms of for allowing for providing some form of a tax deduction dealing with one's travel and accommodation, Mr. Speaker. There is merit for that. Well, if you take it from the micro situation and apply it to the macro situation, one can get a better appreciation as to why it is that we should be taking this bill and looking at it quite seriously.